Welcome back to the Wise Athletes Podcast. Today's episode number 63 with Dr. Rick Cohen is on the topic of testosterone with a capital T. This is a heavy topic for the older athlete and especially for men. We all know people who are getting supplemental testosterone, whether they rave about it or keep it a secret. I decided it was time to find out what was all the hubbub. Rick Cohen, MD, is a leading authority in the fields of nutrition, sports performance, and longevity medicine. Dr. Cohen says that testosterone is a critical marker of health status and is often an issue for the older male endurance athlete. Key signs of likely testosterone issues include losing or difficulty gaining muscle, decreased libido, and loss of morning wood. The good news is there are many things we can do on our own to recover our health and our testosterone. Listen in as Dr. Cohen shares his tips as well as many details about his work with athletes looking for better performance and better health. And be sure to listen to the end to hear about how to sign up for Dr. Cohen's study on a testosterone boosting protocol that includes some low-cost testing of your own testosterone levels. All right, let's talk to Dr. Cohen. Dr. Rick Cohen, welcome to the Wise Athletes Podcast.
Thanks, Joe. Glad to be here. Lovely Saturday morning.
Yes.
Western North Carolina.
And now we are both in Western North Carolina. Isn't that amazing? Small world. Well, testosterone is a topic that has sort of been floating around in my brain somewhere for a long time. I mentioned to you offline here that I tried to be a bodybuilder when I was in high school, and, testosterone, if I only knew where to get some, I surely would have done it. But, as I got older, of course, didn't want to, mess myself up, all these injecting chemicals and things, there's like no way I'd ever do anything like that. But the older I got, the more and more I heard about this dreaded thing called low T. And, did I have that? And is that all just bunk and some dodge for being able to take illegal drugs to as a performance enhancer? I never really knew and never really looked into it until now. And so I'm really tickled to have you on, Rick.
Awesome. Yeah, it's important. And, I'm just going to lead off, like they say, go big or go home, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to go big and go home with a sort of a reframing statement. And I want people to think of testosterone in a different way. You mentioned, we hear low T, low T, low T. And it's like, well, you either have low T or you don't. Well, no. Okay. Testosterone, here's the point for men. Think of testosterone as sort of a gauge or a marker of your overall health and well-being. So for men, whatever the age is, and we know that because testosterone levels in men have declined 25% over the past 20 years. And we can get into the reasons for that. And we know testosterone declines as we get older, but not necessarily because we get older. Okay. Because there's more time accumulation. There's more things to go wrong.
So more just this indicator of health rather than
it's an indicator. And that's the big statement. I would say your total and free testosterone levels are maybe one of the best markers of overall health in men, because there's so many things that can throw that off, and we can get into that. But if you have a good high testosterone, you're healthy, right? All the pieces are working, all the connections, the enzymes, the pituitary, the testes, the proteins in the blood, your cell receptors, your mitochondria are all flowing. And if you have good testosterone and you're feeling well, then you're in a good place. And if your testosterone is not if it's not a low T, but if it's not where it needs to be, it means there's a link there that's not strong. And, the challenge is trying to find that link, and you can do pretty well. Sometimes it takes some detective work. So that's the big statement that if people can walk away from this podcast, go, oh, okay, I'm going to think of it a different way. And that sort of means paying attention to your testosterone on a reasonable basis, every 4 to 6 months in some ways, because what you do, how you train, the stress you're under, the lack of sleep will all lead to declines in testosterone.
Right. Well, that's great. What I'm hoping, tell me if I'm wrong, But what I'm hoping we're going to be able to do here today for our audience and for me personally is be able to understand better what are the things we do wrong in our lifestyle
Mhm.
that accumulate over time that cause this indicator of our health, testosterone, to start to decline. And so what can we do to reverse that ourselves, not by taking a drug or going to a doctor or things like that. It's just, the lifestyle things, what we eat, how we deal with stress, how we exercise or don't exercise, et cetera, that we could do to make a difference. Sort of like, anybody who's my age, an older athlete who is trying to stay strong as long as possible, they've noticed a decline
Mhm.
in a variety of ways, and they've been making changes in order to try to compensate for those declines. And maybe some of the things that they and I have been doing have been helping with my testosterone also. But maybe there's more things that we could all learn about and do on our own. And then there are even more things that can be done with an expert like yourself. Is that going to
Right.
be the story?
Yeah, yes. And I think let me take that and say, you made an important point there. And most people think low T and they think, oh, I'm going to get some testosterone injection or take a medicine or try some herb. And what you said is really the key point that most people don't think. It's really how you're living. And when we look at, that's why that testosterone is a guide point, because you really have two different, you have you and I who are getting older, who probably our testosterone aren't quite. I think mine's still pretty good. And I'll bet yours is probably pretty good as well. But they're not what they were when we were younger, maybe a slight decline. Mine isn't too bad, right? I try to do everything. But then you have people who are significantly low, right? They may be just over what would be considered threshold. But even then, that person, there's definitely a key factor. That's why did that happen? If it's not an infection, if it's not they're not kicked in their nuts, if they don't have a varicocele, if they don't have a pituitary tumor, if they don't have a medical pathology, which 95% of the people don't have. There's only about 4 or 5% of the people who have a true pathology that require a medical or a replacement intervention. The other 95%, it's a lifestyle, it's a metabolic, it's a stress, it's there's a food, it's a toxin, there's all these different factors that come into play. And let me just if you could allow me here just a minute. I was trying to think of a good analogy of testosterone. This is probably maybe a second key point. There are many factors, right, that play a role in testosterone, and we can go deeper if you want at some point. There's the brain that has to signal the testes. There's the testes that have to produce it. There's the blood that then has to carry the hormones to the cell. There's the cell receptors, which have to recognize the testosterone. Then you have the membrane and the mitochondria, which have to actually produce the energy. So you have all these, and you have the liver, which can be messing up the protein. So you have multi pieces that have to be in sync. And if any one of these are sort of out of whack due to lifestyle, diet, stress, toxins, too much alcohol, overtraining, lack of physical training, the system is not going to be connected. It's not going to flow right. And the analogy I sort of use is if you're trying to grow some plants, right? And you have an irrigation system. You're trying to grow them in Colorado or Bend, Oregon, and you require this irrigation system, which needs to be timed. Okay, so it has a timer because you can't just flood the water onto the field. So you have a timer and this is what testosterone does. It pulses through the day. So you're providing a certain amount through the day and a certain timing. You have your pump, which needs to pull the water down the canal. You have the pipes, which need to deliver the water, and then you have your source, whether it's reservoir or you're purchasing elsewhere. Now, the current philosophy is I look at the field and it's dry. The current philosophy is, oh, wait, let me go check the timer. Let me go check the pipes. Let me go check the pump. Let me go check the reservoir. We don't do that. What we do is we call our buddy and we say, hey, can you deliver a water truck? And the guy says, sure, I'll deliver that water truck, but you can only have it for 3 or 4 hours and I can't come back for 2 weeks. So we're going to just deliver that water truck. We're going to dump it on the field and then we're going to let it be. Well, that's what we do with testosterone injections. We just dump testosterone into the system and we don't care about the metabolic consequences or the water, flooding things out. And that's sort of our state of addressing it. But what we need to do is be looking at all those different factors. And that's where the lifestyle, the stress, the diet, the toxins, the liver, all these things come into play. So hopefully that sort of gives people a different view of the process, because it requires a little bit of work. It requires understanding about functional health, and it doesn't require a medicine. It's a little bit harder. It's a lot easier to take this injection, but that's not the fix.
Well, that's great. Well, so I wonder if you could step back just a second for the sake of our audience and just tell us a little bit about your background. How did you become an expert in testosterone? And then tell us about what are some of the symptoms of the testosterone falling? How do we know that this is happening other than seeing it in the advertisements? How do we know that our testosterone is falling? Each of us personally, things that we might have noticed.
Yeah, so I'm a functionally oriented physician, so as you can understand, it's trying to understand physiology. We don't give things necessarily a name. It's just, when health is out of balance, right? Koyaanisqatsi, your health is out of balance. The goal is to figure out the functional physiology of the body. I originally became involved with more of a functional oriented training through working with guys such as Terry Hartog. He's in Belgium. He's sort of a very famous hormonal educator. The Broda Barnes Foundation, which sort of took on the work of this Dr. Broda Barnes, who was very much into thyroid health. And he was sort of an old world family practitioner who didn't rely on lab tests. He actually, when family practitioners could look at people, and they could say, because they didn't have labs, they could look at someone with thyroid or adrenal and go, okay, your skin is thick, you're losing your eyebrows, right? Your hair is dry. There's a particular glistening to the skin. The toenails look, and that's how they would diagnose. And they'd measure temperature, and then they'd give people a natural glandular thyroid, and had dramatic effects on that. But much more, they didn't rely on labs. So work with him. And then the other gentleman I work with, who's sort of we'll call him the godfather of hormonal health, is Gene Shippen. Gene Shippen wrote the first book, Testosterone Syndrome, which came out in the early 2000s. And, he's still around, and who's sort of crossing of that old world family practitioner and sort of the modern. He's in his 80s now. And I hadn't spoke to him for 15 years. I spoke to him recently, and he's just as wise and clever as he ever was. I have forgotten what a character this guy is. But awesome. So I work with him as well. So sort of combining some of the European methods, the Broda Barnes old world family practitioner methods, mentoring and doing some conferences with Gene Shippen, and then sort of throwing sort of a functional medicine. Gene was more of a traditional family practitioner, delivered baby, right? That type of guy. So, but I came from more of a functional health, and then my additional background is sort of in nutritional product formulation. So I sort of layered all these, pieces together into my own little cake, right? So I have a different view, or a more comprehensive view of sort of putting these different pieces together. And, I actually developed some products. In 2001, Viagra came out.
Yes.
And we were seeing in my work with Broda Barnes and Gene Shippen, it was like, people didn't know about T. It was like, no one knew Fix My T. It didn't exist. There was no topical testosterone. It was just injections. And that was it. So the only way you could get topical testosterone was like a compounding pharmacist can make it for you. Right. And injections were really cheap, but no one was pushing it because there was no pharmaceutical dollar at that point. So when Viagra came out, when happenstancely, this medicine, which was supposed to be for coronary artery disease, for nitric oxide didn't work there, but it worked elsewhere.
Right.
And as it became more of an issue, now we have an awareness of men's health. And I saw, it's like, I said, this is coming. And I actually got involved. I made a particular, with sort of the first over-the-counter or supplement for men at that point.
Huh.
We're the first one on the market. I was the sort of developer and actually a radio spokesperson with regard to this particular product in the early 2000s. So, so ever since then, we got involved in hormone testing and saliva hormone testing, where I was even working with some pharmaceutical companies, and then just the market got flooded. So it's something that I did very much so for about 10 years, and for the past 10, 15 years, been really more involved in sort of overall performance and health and longevity. And just recently, there was an opportunity to sort of provide our hormone test kit, back on the market. I was reached out by someone I work with, and they wanted me to sort of provide this tool for people to monitor their health. So here I am back in the testosterone realm, and with a lot more information, a lot
Fantastic.
more knowledge, and a lot more tools that exist than Broda Barnes had.
Wow. Well, so what I'm after, and the people who follow me along on this podcast are after, is what you do, apparently. So what a good fit. We're looking to fight off the declines in our athletic performance that seem to be due to age, or maybe you're going to say that it's just due to time and lifestyle, and time in a bad lifestyle. And there are things that we can do to offset that. But we also want to live a long time too. And so we don't want to do things that are going to injure our ability to be healthy for a long time, and only give us some sort of short-term benefits. We can win a race this year kind of a thing.
Exactly.
So that's really great. Well, let's start with how do they know? How can they sense that they've got this testosterone decline?
Yeah. So there's some key, this is from Gene Shippen, and he'll say it outright. You got morning wood, right? If you do not have a regular morning wood, your testosterone is not where it needs to be. That's probably the greatest, simplest, most demonstrative marker that we can pay attention to, and that'll fluctuate and change. So if that's not there, it's an easy one, right? Doesn't require very much science. If that's not there, it's not the only reason that would be, for sure. Like, there could be neurological issues, there could be vascular issues.
But you should have that,
or you've got
something wrong.
That is correct. If that's going on, it's like, I'm getting older. Well, so that's what we hear the doctors tell us: you're getting older. No, no, your body isn't as healthy, or it's not functioning as well as it used to, because you haven't had the time, to muck it up, right? We're much more resilient. And yes, the cells and the DNA, and that is changing. And we're all deal with a template of cellular, diminishment. And that's a whole nother conversation of our aging clock. So morning wood. Loss of muscle, right? Can't hold muscle the way you used to. So if you've put on muscle and you lost muscle and put on body fat, huge indicator, right? Drive, I'd say, I'd say with you, well, even before that, recovery. If you don't recover as well, there are many things that can also do that. Lack inadequate protein, overtraining, but you start to piece these together.
Well, maybe all of these things impact your testosterone too.
They do. That's correct, right? Okay. So poor recovery, sort of lack of, I think, a flatness, a lack of motivation. And I even say it's partly getting older. So testosterone affects dopamine in the brain. It's a neurotransmitter. Just for those. So we have two main neurotransmitters in our brain: dopamine and serotonin. Yeah. Dopamine is our drive. It's our passion. It's our hunter gatherer. It's go out and fight. It's that intensity you have before a competition, or that intensity you have before a race. Serotonin is become. It's relax. It's after a meal. You're just sort of sitting around and
you're satisfied.
So there's always a balance. Well, testosterone drives dopamine, and dopamine drives testosterone. So sort of like the studies that say if you smile, it'll make you happy even when you're sad. If you go out and do something that has, heck, if I'm a Duke basketball fan, right? It was like yesterday's game, right? But when they win, I'm sure if I can measure instantaneously testosterone, it's going to be higher because you have this dopamine, you have a satisfaction. They've done studies where, your team wins in a competition and the fans who watch it have higher testosterone.
That's great.
And a lot of that is maybe they're drunk, but a lot of it is after there's a drive and there's a certain activity, or people who are doing more thrill seekers. And it's a little bit of a balance, because you could say, and this we know, orthopedic surgeons, football players have higher testosterones in general than pediatricians, accountants, and artists, right? It's just the nature of the beast, because there's this back and forth of neurotransmitters. And the key to know, with testosterone is we're all different. Like my natural testosterone is going to be different than someone else who's going to be completely different than my son's been watching the World Strongman, Rogue Fitness recently. And those guys have a lot of testosterone, right? Just naturally, most of them don't have hair, right? Just huge, ripped, their facial structure is different. It's just, they were born with that particular balance, and that affects your drive. So those are some other things. Those are the big ones. Mood, depression, recovery, drive, morning wood, muscle. There are a bunch of others, but those are sort of the key ones that affect how we live on a day-to-day basis. And there's a survey. There's a survey that's actually been developed and tested. It's called an ATOM test. What it means is irrelevant, but it's a 17 question testosterone related that's graded from 1 to 5. And when you tally this up, it sort of relates to, a 92%, whatever the percentage is, relationship to testosterone. But ultimately, you need to test, right? Ultimately, you can do a total and a free testosterone through blood or saliva. Total you can't do. But if you do that, then you'll know. And you match that up with how you feel. Now you have a real efficient, useful gauge of your health, which can then say, all right, maybe that motivates you to make some changes. You've used the device, CGM, right?
Sure.
So the CGM is cool because you can see the changes without getting into how it can affect your health down the road. One of the more powerful things that I've seen when I have people wear CGM is if they care about their health and they see a spike, or their blood sugar doesn't come down over time,
right?
They make a change, right? They know, and it's great that it's more instantaneous, but I'm not going to eat that, or I'm going to eat this at another time of day. Right. If you know what your testosterone levels are, if you know some of the symptoms related to those, then maybe that will motivate someone to go, okay, I'll prioritize sleep, right? I'll check into what my blood sugar is. Though that's another big one. Inflammation caused by blood sugar fluctuation affects the testes. It affects metabolism. So that's a huge one. Getting blood sugar balanced. The third there's 4 of them. The third biggest one is stress. Pituitary. Cortisol affecting the brain. The brain sort of a thermostat, and when you're under stress, it stops sending the signals to the testes to work.
That's interesting. I had heard that there's like an inverse relationship between cortisol and testosterone.
There is, correct. Yeah. Okay. So when your body is under stress, it becomes more catabolic, right? So there's an anabolic versus a catabolic balance. So if you're under stress and you need to survive or run away or get into a super sympathetic state, what is your body going to do? It doesn't care about necessarily, building your muscles up and recovering. It just wants you to live. So when you're pushing, I have this major stress, I'm shutting down testosterone, right? For women, it shuts down fertility.
Well, yeah, and I guess that there's some connection to that for the men too. Maybe they're not out seeking mates when they're just trying to survive.
You're not out seeking mates when you're just trying to survive. That is correct. Yeah. You're just trying to find a safe place and you're just trying to live. So the body knows that, and it shuts that down. And yes, there's a good part to that, in hormetic effects where we challenge the body, whether it's sauna or cold or fasting, or we're talking about later, putting an ice pack on your balls, right? These are challenges we can make to our body that make us stronger. But if we're continually under stress,
yeah, that's right. Because the stress, even exercise, which is everybody knows is good for you, that's stress. So it's
stress. Yeah.
It's not that having no stress is the ideal. You just need some stress, and then you need to recover from the stress, right?
That's correct. And the recovery is the most important part of the physical activity. We tend to focus on, like I do. You familiar with Carol Bike?
No.
Okay, so Carol Bike is this AI. It's really quite cool, right? So it's an AI powered magnetic flywheel cycle. Okay, and what they've done, So what they've done is they've created an algorithm that copies something called the Wingate protocol, and that's So the Wingate protocol, you need to do in an exercise physiology lab, and basically
like they're doing VO2 max testing or something like that.
It's 2 20-second all-out physical activity. Okay. The flywheel adjusts based on how much power you can generate, how long you can hold that power curve, and then plus your heart rate recovery. Okay. So the score that you get and your fitness level is partly based on the power you can generate, but the algorithm is actually more important on how fast your heart can recover, because that's the key. How quick can you flip from sympathetic to parasympathetic? And when you can strengthen that nervous system response, you are fitter.
Sure.
So you run up the hill and it's hard, but now you can recover, and you know how you have your next hill set and you've recovered, right? So that's the important part. It's very cool.
How does that relate to testosterone?
The challenge of the stressor, that quick stressor, and the recovery. So it's that recovery part of the curve, which is the most important for the body. So when we stress ourselves, whether it's doing intense, right? So you do heavy weightlifting.
Yeah.
Right. Or you can do heavy weightlifting with bands. So you can get the same growth hormonal anabolic response without having to move as much weight and get hurt. But that heavy lifting, short bursts, will have a hormonal effect, but it's much more as opposed to, we look at cyclists who are doing 5-day, 50, 60 miles a day, and that trashes them, right? There's inflammation, there's low hormonal levels, there's white cell counts. It's not healthful. So anyone's doing that, it's not a healthful thing. It's a stressor on your body. Now, does that mean you can't recover from it? No, totally not. But, when we look at, chemistries of people who do that and they do it too frequently, they're wearing themselves down. And it's a price you pay if you really love it. But don't think, don't think it's a health thing. It might be a mental thing. It might be a purpose for it, but it's not a physiological, hormonally beneficial activity.
Cool. Well, hey, let's dive into, and I don't know what the categories are, but let's dive into like some buckets and then some specific thoughts or tips or rules of thumb that we can all take away from this on what we can do for ourselves to improve the way we exercise or the way we recover or what we eat or our lifestyle things, factors, how we deal with stress, et cetera. Even things like supplements or alcohol consumption or, how would you want to go through that? It must be a long list.
Yeah, there's certainly a number of different things one could do. And, since we're starting, like we said, just to repeat, we're starting with this framework of testosterone as your marker. So objectively knowing your levels is a really good thing. And there are other markers, other markers with testosterone. At some point, people, you can do total. Let me just sort of clarify total and free testosterone.
Good.
So total testosterone is the amount that the actual testes produces. Testosterone is not water soluble. So it actually needs to be carried around in the blood, bind to a protein called sex hormone binding globulin that's produced in the liver. This protein is sort of it holds 97 to 99% of testosterone. Okay. Then there's 1 to 3% that isn't bound, and that's the amount that can actually get to the cell receptor. So the total testosterone is the 97 to 99% that's bound to the protein, plus the 1 to 3%, which is called free or bioavailable. And it's not, there's some gray areas in that, but for the sake of explanation, we have 2 buckets, and it's only that small little bucket that gets to the cells.
So it's the level of that small bucket that we're interested in?
The level of that small bucket is the one that can get to the cell that we're most interested in. Now, if you just test, here's the why you really want to know both. If you just test total, you can have a decent total, but for some reason that protein is running at that 99%. So your liver is inflamed, or your liver there's some estrogens, or your insulin's off, or a bunch of reasons, or you're exposed to xenoestrogens, that'll all rise the SHBG. So now you have a good total testosterone. Let's say it's 600, which is like upper 70%. But your free testosterone could be low, and I see that a lot. So someone could look at your total, doc said, I looked at total, you're good. But no, you don't have enough signal. Or vice versa, if you just look at free and it's low, then you don't know if you're producing enough, right? So you can have a low free if you have too much protein, right? You can also have a low free if you're not producing enough at the factory.
Can you have a high free but low total?
No, there's not enough dialing, fine tuning on that.
Okay.
So the idea is knowing both, and then other markers. There are other key markers that in the brain, like there's something called luteinizing hormone, which is the signal from the pituitary to the testes, and that tells us how the brain's functioning. Right. There's that protein, the SHBG, which tells us how we're holding on to it. And then there's the other hormones such as estrogen, which the body makes from testosterone, and we need some estrogen. We need a balance, because actually estrogen is the hormone that gets into the brain and it's the one that the brain has a feedback on. So the thermostat for testosterone is not as much set on testosterone, it's more set on estrogen.
And I understand that body fat levels affect conversion of testosterone.
Body fat levels affect, phthalates in personal care products, xenoestrogens in the environment,
right? Plastics, BPA type stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Body fat. So that man boobs, right? So if your estrogen's high, that's going to drop your testosterone, because your body says, it thinks you have too much testosterone. Because the surrogate estrogen is elevated. So
because that's what gets into the brain, and then the brain says, turn it all down.
Turn it all down, because we don't want you to have too much estrogen. That's correct. So it's using that as a surrogate. Right. So those are key markers. Other ones that we look at, are on this level is ferritin levels, which are
iron.
This is an iron storage, which you don't want too much of. Ferritin's a little bit tricky because it could be an inflammatory marker. The medical term is acute phase reactant, right? So it can be up, like if I measure your blood after you did a marathon or did a big cycling race, your ferritin's going to be high. It's a marker of inflammation.
Is that like maybe even breakdown of your muscles or something if you've done something hard?
Partly because ferritin is in the red cells. That's correct.
Okay.
So
one of the things that, and I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, you're probably right in the middle of something important, but the thing that I've been trying to find a way to squeeze into this discussion was this business of the receptor. And what I always understood is that the level itself, the reason why different people have different levels, and some people with a low level are fine and some people with a high level are not fine, is that they have different levels of receptors, and it's the combination of the amount of the hormone and the number of receptors that determines the effect. Am I saying something that makes sense?
That's correct. And I'll tell you two ways. The most poignant explanation of that is when I was doing in full practice, and I would give people injection, they'd come in and they'd have low testosterone, right? Or their testosterone total would be 400, so the range is 300 to 1,000. And they'd come at 400 and they just would feel like crap. And they just, all the things we talk about, depression, fatigue, fatigue's another big one with testosterone I overlook. Yeah. Falling asleep after dinner is like for some reason, a key marker of low testosterone.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's the guy who eats dinner and just goes up to bed. You give them testosterone and they come back like in 2 to 4 weeks and they're like, it's a new person. Like you've like turned them back on. It's really incredible because now you've flooded these receptors, which have been upregulated because testosterone has been low, right? So testosterone is very low. The cells are going, shh, we need more, right? So they're becoming more and more sensitive. So now you've given them testosterone, you've got them back up, and it's like they're electric. Then they go and they stay this way, and 3 months later, 2 things happen. It's like almost to the one. Doc, this isn't working anymore. I just don't feel the same way. It's like, can we make the dose higher? I'm like, no. Your levels are good. No, can we really? It's like, it was so good. And I was so blah, blah, blah. And my wife was so, I was like, okay. So one thing is like I said, the first thing I realized after a period of time is like, here's what I want you to do. I want you to stop. No, I don't want to stop. No, you need to stop. And because you just told me it's not working. So I don't want you to be on a medicine that's not working. So some will and some won't. But the ones that do, they'll come back in 3 weeks and go, oh, I forgot how bad I felt.
So they were actually still getting a benefit. They just
didn't have that initial, right? It's like moving, like you said, Boulder, you move to a new location and it's like fabulous and it's beautiful. Or you meet someone, a beautiful woman. It's like all those initial things. We lived on Orcas Island in the Pacific Northwest, and it was like, and I think even like after 5 years, I still appreciate it, but I didn't stop and stare at the gorge, right? You just lose that. It's just natural being. And the other thing is, especially people forget, like we don't, it all depends. They didn't realize like testosterone, like what it was. And that's another thing for guys with testosterone. They don't realize how they felt when they're in their 20s. It's sort of a frog in a pot. It's like they're getting heated and after a period of time, they forgot how good they felt. So pulling it away was like the best sort of innovation in reminding people. So what happened was they took their testosterone and the receptors downregulated. So what they initially felt was just, was a wonderful honeymoon phase, but you're just not going to, have that extreme high.
And if you kept upping the testosterone, eventually it would cause some health problems.
You're going to cause this, right? Because you're going to now make too much estrogen. You're going to make too much DHT, and you're going to have all these downregulated hormones, which are, and remember, going way back to the beginning of the talk where I talked about so the irrigation system, testosterone is pulsatile. When we give people injectable testosterone, we're really not giving it in a physiological way.
Oh,
right. So it's, you're stuck. If someone's really low, you need to help them. And there's ways you can do it. People have gotten more sophisticated with not just giving, like the worst is a pellet. It's easy for you. You don't have to worry about it. Maybe it's slowly released, or, you'll give people slow release that lasts a month, and, we're getting into replacement. But if you look at half-lives and time curves, it's a lot better to give someone a smaller amount frequently during the week, 2 or 3 times. That's better. And it's even better to sort of go lower and combine that with like a sublingual. And this way you're getting some pulsatile on top of a basic plateau. So those are nuances of replacement that are much more sophisticated. Or even while we're on this realm, if guys we're talking about testosterone support pharmaceutically, is you don't have to replace. Because when you replace, what you're doing is you're telling the factory, whatever is producing, we don't need you, right? So now you're throwing a signal to the brain to saying, don't make LH, because it's seeing testosterone, and it tells the testes to shut down. So people who take testosterone, their testicles shrink and they become, their fertility goes down because you're shutting down. So if you're young, if you're 75 or 80, sure, take testosterone, right? And it's like, I just put my dad on it. He was like 300, to go through all these pieces, not worth it. He was losing muscle. It's like, just take it, and do it a couple times a week. He's in Mexico and, he figured out how to do that. And that's, you can't be perfect. You gotta sort of weigh the benefits of what he's able to access and achieve. Were there other ways? Sure. Probably. But if you take someone 40 and you put them on testosterone, you're not fixing anything. You're just committing them to testosterone for life. And because what if you're just, it's a Band-Aid to the problem. And that's, so there are other medications that people use, something called HCG, which is human chorionic gonadotropin, which acts like that brain signal, which actually can tell the testes to make. And it's one of the things I learned from Gene Shippen was see if the testes are working. So if you give them that and you can produce testosterone, it says it's not a testicular problem. The factory is still going on. Maybe it's the brain. And then there's another medication that came out. It's called enclomiphene. And what that does is block, it's a selective estrogen receptor modulator. It's called a SERM, right? So it blocks the receptor to estrogen in the brain. So as we said before, if the estrogen isn't triggering the brain, then it's going to send out a signal. So it's a way to trick the brain a little bit. But what you're not doing is you're not shutting down the factory. And it's sort of kickstarting that whole irrigation system as opposed to just bringing in the truck.
And then maybe that buys you time to do some lifestyle things to get
Exactly. So that's probably the best way for guys. Like if you're really feeling poorly, and you're young, I would do something like HCG and a SERM. And here's the challenge as well, like from a medical point, if someone's not feeling good and your testosterone is so low, they don't want to go to the gym, right? Yeah. They don't have the energy or the real capability to recover. So you have to do something to get the system going and prime the pump in essence. Right. And that, and that works really reliably and consistently where, just taking a botanical, that's like a next level type, support if someone needs it. But again, that doesn't fix the problem.
Well, good. So we're going to run out of time without having hit the most important part here. So we need to dive into what can people do to make a difference?
Yeah. So the big things, sleep, right? So sleep, know your sleep, I'm sure things you've talked about, know your sleep. And, I use something called an MFit. It's, there's lots of devices and I've worn Aura, Whoop, BioStrap, so right now after going through 5, this MFit pad, which goes underneath your pad can sort of track your sleep metrics.
Oh, okay.
And it does it reliably and consistently where the others rely on called light, PPG. So that relies on measuring your body metrics and they're just not as accurate. So this is really solid.
And what is it about the sleep? Is there like a phase of sleep where the testosterone?
Well, your testosterone natural cycles through the day. It's high in the morning.
Okay.
And low at night. So, most men, right? They're like, it's after night, right? So you think about it, we get drunk and then it's at night. That's when we're not at our most potent. Our most potent is in the morning.
Okay.
So we've had this period of time, to recover. Growth hormone, melatonin, these are all high at night, which then triggers that natural circadian rhythm to be high in the morning. I guess it's like we had to go out and work, right? That dopamine, serotonin, we're up, we're restored. We need to start the day. We need to accomplish things. Serotonin at night, we're low. So it's that sort of natural rhythm.
Okay. So good sleep, quality sleep.
Good quality sleep and sort of pay attention to it. You're an accountant, a finance guy. I'm an engineer. Objective measurements. You cannot beat an objective measurement because we fool ourselves. So that's a huge thing. The second thing for me is blood sugar management.
Yeah, before we jump out of
Yeah.
the sleep thing,
Yeah. Got
because
it. Uh-huh.
I think that helping people with their sleep maybe also is another thing that people can do for their testosterone, but the nose breathing, nasal breathing for their sleeping. I mean, is this something that you've done or you've seen help?
Yeah, I wear a mouth tape as
Okay.
well. Yeah, if anyone has not read the book Breathe by James Nestor,
Yeah.
I highly recommend that. It's
Yeah.
such a good read.
Yeah. One of my episodes late last year was with Dr. Dallum, who a researcher at Colorado State. He believes in 100% nasal breathing, even when you're exercising at all levels of intensity. Anyway, anybody who hasn't listened to that episode should definitely do it.
Yeah, so simple things to do, the basics, right? Turning off the light, not eating 3 hours before
Right.
bed. Those
Right.
are huge. Not reading in bed. Well, if you're going to read in bed with a Kindle, wear some, blue blocking glasses or turn on a filter. The nasal tape, helpful for us. We have a cooling pad, and I forgot, I really enjoy that. Just
Yeah.
keeping the bed cool or your room cool and dark.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other sort of device, which I like, is sort of a cooling pack, and we can talk more about that later on. You can actually use
Yeah.
a
This is
stick.
for your private parts, eh?
Yeah, that's correct. You can use
Okay.
it's sort of a challenge because cooling yourself before bed is something that is also so people who do cold plunges or cold showers,
Or they take a hot bath and then they cool from it.
right. So cooling, getting your body temperature down, and that's where the cooling blanket is, and a cold shower or a cold plunge. A
Yeah.
face cleanse, those are sympathetic, but then they turn parasympathetic, and we want that parasympathetic
Yeah.
dominance to occur. So one of the, might as well mention now. So there's a way. It's called a jetpack, and I learned about this maybe 6 to 8 months ago from a naturopath in Australia, actually.
Yeah.
And when you cool the testicles, you actually do a couple things. You're reducing any inflammation in the testicles, which can affect testosterone performance. You are sort of creating that hormetic cooling effect, because there's a lot of blood flow in that area. So it's a way to get cooling into your body.
Great.
And it causes this sort of relaxation response. And it's not too bad. I regularly do it. And, it's something that we're actually doing a small little unofficial clinical study, to sort of to see the effects of testosterone.
Well, let's get the details of that. So people, if they want to sign up with you, they'll know how to do that. But let's do that at the end. Let's keep going through the list of things.
Okay. So those are the sleep things, and then looking at that sleep metrics, and you'll be able to see how much deep sleep you have, how much tossing and turning. Did you have awakenings? You can even look at your heart rate and your breathing rate, and that can help you. Like my breathing rate with the tape mask is down to 11 or 12 breaths per minute, which is
very good.
Which is very good, right? And my deep sleep, I can tell when it's off. Like last night was much better. We actually ate a little differently. So
I have actually, just for the audience's curiosity, I have been advocating for nasal breathing while sleeping, and I have never used tape because I feel like I don't need to, but I just bought some today. I am going to be using the tape because it's going to help. Even if I don't really need it, I don't know what I'm doing when I'm sleeping, so I'm going to tape my mouth.
It helps a lot, and and there may be just things we can't do. If you read James Nestor's book about, we're born and our jaws and our oral, mandible is just not as wide as it should be, due to de-evolution, right? If you go back and just he went into the catacombs and they, with an orthodontics, and they looked at old skulls and the changes, that have occurred even in the past 100 years due to dietary changes, and mouths are smaller, and apnea and snoring, and just not a lot you could do with that. If you get a kid, you can actually get a mandible. They can actually. There's some people who are doing work in that, like some dentists that work with young kids that can expand the mandible. So sleep. More about that, or I think those are
no. Let's just keep rolling. We've talked about sleep enough. There's got to be many other things.
Metabolic, and I think for me, like I said earlier, everyone should wear CGM. It's just like it's a no-brainer. You don't need to wear it for life, but just to have that awareness of what you're eating, and we think we're good,
Yeah.
You're not.
So that blood test you get, A1C, and they're
No,
telling
it's
you what your
worthless.
average.
Yeah, it's
Yeah. I
worth.
mean,
It's a 3 month. How is a 3 month average window going to help you decide what you give you
right.
feedback?
I mean, it definitely helps if your blood sugar is high all the time. But if the problem you've got that I might have is where I have spikes if I eat the
That's
wrong
correct.
thing, then that's not going to tell me anything. So I got
Nope.
to have the
A1C
and
is
as
good, right? Exactly.
yeah.
If you're diabetic and you're trying to look for downtrends, but even then, it's a good marker. But here's the thing with A1C as well is A1C depends on a 90-day red cell life. So people who go very low carb and they change their metabolism, the red cell life gets longer. So now you have someone who's been really clean and all their metrics are good. Their insulin's low, their triglyceride HDL ratio is awesome, their CGM is good, and they have a high fasting glucose because there's a physiological response, and their A1C is high. I'm like, what? It's like because the numbers are wrong. No one ever the
Yeah.
foundation of these numbers were based on old data, based on population
Okay.
bases, and not looking at low carb paleo keto people. Right?
Okay, good. So all right, so use a CGM. What else?
Using a CGM for blood sugar control is huge. Stress is probably the third thing that I would address, and I'd show it to you, but
What do you do for stress?
yeah. So I mean, you can do breathing. I go in the sauna. I do functional yoga. Where I'll breathe. Sometimes before bed, I've fallen out of favor with this. I would do some box breathing and so forth.
Okay.
Those are all good. Right now, the two things that I'm quite interested in are this. It's called Get Leaf. I'm a device guy, right? I'm a metric. It's Leaf. So heart rate variability. So let's get back to tracking, because otherwise we don't know how to adjust it. Please, you don't need to do these all at once. Right? I've been doing this, you've been doing this, Joe, I've been doing this for a number of years, and it's all about one little piece at a time. It's all about taking control of your health. If you want to achieve something, if you want to train on a bike, you need to know your power. You need to have training. So it's how you can take control of your health so you can live a healthful.
Yeah, you got to have feedback, or how can you ever?
And you're not getting it from your doctor.
Yeah.
They're there when you're sick and really sick. So this is stuff you need to help or have a coach. So the Leaf is an EKG patch, and it differs than all the other heart rate variability devices out there because it directly measures from the EKG. It's a direct electrical measurement. So all the other measurements are downstream. They're looking at the vessel and they're using light to do that. So because of that, you cannot get a live heart rate variability. You cannot get a live sympathetic parasympathetic state. So now you have this device that you can wear during the day, and it does two really cool things. It gives you a mind-body awareness, just like the CGM. So now you can say, oh, wait, I think I'm stressed. And you get a ping. It's like your heart rate variability just dropped 10% or 15%, right? And if it's pinging you all day, then you know you're not doing something right? So now you've created that awareness of, oh, okay, I need to make a change. And whatever that change could be, it could be personal, but then they tie into a particular breathing pattern. And what's really cool about this is you can do your box breathing, or your 4-7-8 breathing or whatever. There's various different types of breathing, many more. They link the breathing pattern, and they found it's a different ratio for each person, slightly different, to your heart rate. So you're actually breathing in at a certain point and breathing out, and because the EKG, this is an EKG you're wearing, right? And so this trains yourself over 2 minutes to raise your heart rate variability. So now you've developed this ability in a very powerful way to directly hack your parasympathetic sympathetic system by breathing.
Well, cool. Okay, for the sake of time, we'll get something in the show notes for that Get Leaf thing. And what else?
So what else?
Like one of the things I've always heard, actually for a long time in multiple different ways, was very hard exercise, like lifting maximum weights or sprinting, things that are your all out.
Right. So the thing I use the Carol bike just again for metric.
Right.
Now,
the Wingate thing. Yeah.
Yeah. The Wingate is super good at doing that. But certainly
going to failure, I guess.
Yeah. It's going to that full failure. Right. And it's going to that full failure. Now, the challenge we have, sprinting would be great. You have injury risk, right? Going uphill hard, doing high intensity training. These are all objective and subjective, and they're definitely much better than going for long rides, right?
Yeah.
So it's Marx
for testosterone.
Marx is in his Primal Fitness book. It's like easy, slow, long, which is sort of that recovery parasympathetic, balanced with short, high intensity, right? Run fast, lift heavy.
Polarized training.
Polarized training. The cheat or the hack on the Go Strong was blood flow restriction bands.
Interesting.
Yeah. So looking up Katsu. So there's all these cool stuff out there that make things safer and easier. What Katsu does is it uses pressurized on your limbs, and what that does is it cycles this through, and it creates or it tricks your body into thinking it's working out harder. So one, you can't lift as much weight. So it's like 30% of your max weight, 40%.
Oh, this is in the blood flow restriction.
Right. So because you have blood, you can't lift as heavy.
Yeah.
So
it's a way of not having to lift as heavy a weight, which might injure your joint, your tendon, but you still get the same metabolic benefit from that you would have gotten from lifting heavy, right?
That's correct. And it does one step better is a lot of the typical hormonal recovery is when you have the damaged fibers. So it's that recovery. But in this case, since you're not pushing as hard, it's more of a lactic acid hormonal response. You don't actually damage the fibers. So you can do it more frequently.
You recover faster because there was less to recover from.
There's less to recover from. Yeah. So that's like a really cool thing that
excellent
with the strength to make things better. Now, none of these have to be done, but they're just ways to do them better.
Yeah.
The ways to do them more efficiently.
Pick what you like and try them and keep trying them until you find things that work. So what about sunlight? I've heard sunlight is a good deal.
Yep. Sunlight, so some of the other markers, which vitamin D vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids are some of the other markers that you want to look at blood, but totally sunlight getting a little bit of like UVB, which is what triggers vitamin D, right? So the problem with getting UVB exposure is the angle of the sun, right? So if you're off season, the angle of the sun reflects through the atmosphere at a very sharp angle. So you get the UVB rays, very, very little make it to the surface. And the same thing during the day, right? When the sun's low, it's refracting through the atmosphere. So that's why to get your UVB, to get vitamin D, it's like 10:30, 11 to 2. That's your peak. Yeah, 10:30, 11 to 2. And depending on your longitude, depending on your latitude, so we're pretty good here. Actually, Western North Carolina is about where Southern California is. We're just a little bit north of that. But if you live in in New England, you live in Oregon, Washington State, that period of sun or UVB exposure is like May through October. Yeah. So you really need to specifically look at that. And the device, someone's supposedly coming out with a full spectrum, but there is, since we're on a trend, there's a device called Sperti, SPERTI, Sperti D. It's a bank of UVB lights.
Oh, okay.
And you can just put it on. We got one this year, and it's 6 minutes. So it's
this is different than just like a light you might use for seasonal affective disorder.
There's a more full spectrum, right? So these are very high UVB intense lights.
So you could get a sunburn from these?
No, you get the sunburn from the UVA.
Oh, okay.
And the UVA it's a debatable, right? It's like the UVA is important for nitric oxide, and the infrared is important for nitric oxide. Those are the other, like whole foods, right? The sun is a spectrum of energy for the body, right? We evolve being outside. Too much causes skin damage and but enough is what we need. So the Spurdy, obviously, vitamin D taking orally is better than not taking it. And if you're going to take vitamin D, you always want to take it with vitamin K and magnesium and enough omega-3. All these fats sort of work synergistically.
Okay.
So vitamin D is definitely linked to some of the free testosterone issues.
Is vitamin A related?
Less so.
Okay.
Testicular function is boron, zinc. Those are selenium, magnesium. Those are the four ones that play a role in testosterone production.
Gotcha.
So some people, these are some of the pieces that people can do is sort of adding in particular nutrients. So those are helpful. So let's say those are I think the big lifestyle factors. From a nutritional point of view, is making sure vitamin D, omega-3, broad-based minerals those are key. And then I say the other piece to it is nitric oxide. Nitric oxide sort of works in conjunction with testosterone, especially for erections. And testosterone triggers nitric oxide. Nitric oxide feeds back to testosterone, and light can play a role in that. The healthy arteries.
Does nasal breathing?
Nasal breathing plays a role in that because you have receptors in the nose. Beet nitrates, right? Beet nitrates. There's a dietary nitrate pathway as well that something that we've the brand that I formulated very much focused for athletes on. Little plug.
We'll get the link to that stuff here. And I wanted to ask you about a couple of other things related to dietary. I mean, one of the problems I'm sure that people have when they're dieting hard and they're exercising very, very hard and they're not eating enough to compensate for how many calories they're burning. And so their fat stores are really low. I mean, this has got to have a testosterone effect.
Oh, totally. Right. Like we talked before, it's that anabolic catabolic balance. So they're just putting themselves in this catabolic mode, and they're breaking down, proteins and muscles because they're going to use that for energy as well. So, in that case, making sure it's a double-edged sword, right? And if you look at strong men, right, loaded with testosterone, they know they will not be as strong. They need that extra. There's a balance of having additional extra body fat to be strong. You're just not going to achieve that. And, all the bodybuilders know that, they're not as strong during their cutting phase. It's just they can't be, but they're sort of going over the edge for a particular event.
Right. So they're cutting for a period of time to have a certain look, but then they
go right
stop
back.
cutting.
Yeah. It's artificially induced.
Yeah. So any kind of an endurance athlete who is constantly trying to keep the weight down, they probably are lowering their testosterone.
Yes. The combination of the endurance events and then trying to keep the weight down at the same time.
And is there like I mean, for the older athlete, there's a anabolic resistance kind of a thing where you really should have more protein than is normally recommended for a younger athlete. Does protein level have any impact on testosterone production?
Geez, that's a good question. I would say probably. I'm just trying to think of a direct pathway, and it's probably is there, but it's a piece, right? You need adequate.
There's no advantage to having low protein, so why not?
Yeah, no, you need protein, right? Because you need those amino acids to fuel the pathway. So I would just, I could be completely wrong, but if you don't have enough amino acids and your body is not being pushed into an anabolic mode, your body's going to say, what do I need testosterone for? Right. So
okay. That's good. Okay.
Logically, it would make sense.
Perfect. One last thing. I'm sorry, two.
And I'd say that's another key factor is just that, getting enough protein, to sort of control. Most people do not get enough protein, it's especially if you're athletic,
right?
And especially if you want to hold muscle, you're looking at a gram and a half per kilo, at least 100 to 120 grams. And that's hard to do for most people, so using like a real high quality beef-based protein or using an essential amino acid supplement can really
that's what I
provide
have to do.
provide a huge benefit. There's the essential amino acids that provide all the pieces, and they're like equivalent to each scoop. 5 grams would give 20 equivalent grams of protein, because protein has to be digested and then it has to be bioavailable, but the amino acids in a particular ratio are all absorbed in. So you're getting very little calories, and in 5 seconds you can get a whole meat. Now it's not, you shouldn't live on that, but it's that quick support. Big difference.
Okay, so the last thing then, actually I just have the one, and that's things that maybe I'll call it toxins, like stuff you might put on your skin, fragrances, that sort of thing, that maybe have some sort of hormonal effect on you, and preservatives and other kinds of chemicals that they put into processed foods. We know that it can affect your gut permeability, but I wonder if any of those things have any impact on testosterone.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, so we have a global fertility issue. There was another book. Shanna Swan's the author. She's been a researcher for years and talking about fertility issues, and just like male testosterone is down, male fertility is down. Not only are sperm count down, because they've actually changed the level of what's considered healthy. It used to be 100 million, now it's like 15 million, and it's another topic, but the fertility docs don't really care so much of men, because they just need a few healthy ones to run them through their equipment. And,
I see.
Right. So, but that's not good for society if we can't, if we can't procreate in 50 years, if you start looking at it, because there's not enough, not only do you not enough healthy sperm, but the sperm that are there can't do their job, right? Because they require mitochondrial energy. So the toxins are playing a role. And the toxins and the xenoestrogens play a role in a couple of different ways. They muck up the receptors, so they combine to receptors. They affect the liver and increase SHBG. They act as a false signal on the brain, just like estrogen would.
Well, is there something we should avoid then to stay away from these things, like processed foods? Maybe don't eat processed foods.
Don't eat processed foods. Get rid of your plastic, and avoid, even if it says BPA free, there's BPS. Avoid using anything that's plastic.
Right. Don't heat stuff up in plastic.
Don't
containers.
Heat stuff. Get the glass containers for your food. If you're someone who works in a cash register, holding, believe it or not, the cash registers and the receipts. Receipts have BPA in them. The personal care. Look at your personal care product. Parabens, bisphenols. Use an organic, natural-based, product. There are many on the market, that don't. If it has fragrance, anything with fragrance is a xenoestrogen. We're bombarded. You literally have to focus and clean house, and you're going to be exposed, but at least you can handle that.
Yeah. Okay. Last question: alcohol. Because alcohol helps you to relax. It makes you feel better. I mean, so it helps with some of the things that you mentioned, but I'm betting that there's more to it.
Yeah, like anything, there's probably, each person has a particular tolerance curve. I mean, in reality, there's a benefit to a couple glasses of wine a week, right? I don't think, if everything is in balance, those aren't going to do you in. Right. So it's understanding where your threshold is. And if it's a good thing and you're enjoying life, you're probably going to be okay. But if someone's drinking 6 beers a night, or has
or it's affecting their sleep somehow.
And you can look at that. So using the MFIT, you can actually see someone's sleep pattern through the night. But I mean, it's a toxin. Alcohol is a toxin, and it can affect the liver. So it's not going to do you good. There's probably a small amount for the social relaxation bit where it could be helpful. So,
well, excellent. Okay, Rick, this has been fantastic. We've run a little over. Hopefully our audience will forgive us, but this was really great information. Tell us how we can find you, and tell us about this study that you're looking for volunteers for.
Yeah, so it's a little bit more. So I have a sort of a performance brand called Pure Clean Performance, and we do a variety of beet-infused performance products, as well as an essential amino acid product, which we've had for 10 years, and high-quality sort of beef-based protein that's super digestible. So there's kept it pretty simple. You can look at that.
Yeah. We'll get your website in the show notes.
Yeah, then we just launched like I said earlier, there was someone who wanted me to sort of bring back our testosterone kit. So we launched a site called Fix My Tea. Fix My Tea. And we're just offering sort of guidance for people to get saliva and serum testing, done at super economic prices. And that's sort of my goal. And what's unique is, we're not only offering these less than what the market is, but we have back-end support. Like most of the labs are just labs, or they're making their money off of the lab margins. And, we're just here to support people long-term. So
great.
So within that realm, we always, as I mentioned, like to vet and test things. So have an opportunity. I would say best way is just to email me at Rick@Pure Clean Performance.
Oh, that's easy.
We're doing a small trial where 20 men or so we're going to be, and we haven't sent it out to our list yet. So you'll probably be getting this at the correct time. You'll get a saliva testosterone kit to check your hormone levels. And then you'll get a jet pack, which is the testicular cooling pack. And you'll wear that 15 minutes while you're in bed at night before you go to sleep. And then you'll get another saliva test kit to check your levels after 6 weeks. And then we'll do one of the male hormone health surveys before and afterwards. So I want to see how you feel, if that improves. And we want to see if we can see measurable hormonal differences. Typically, each of those, like saliva testosterone, is $49 each, and the jet pack is $49. So like the normal price would be about $150 to do that. Yeah. But we're doing it at below cost, and total would be just $49.
Well, that sounds pretty good. I think I'll do it myself.
Yeah, it's just a basic, pretty good deal. It's a way to try something funky with the jet pack, and then also have the opportunity to actually have 2 testosterone tests for the price of 1. So
yeah, that sounds like a really good deal. Well,
no brainer.
Well, fantastic, Rick. Thank you again. I enjoyed chatting with you and becoming educated.
Yeah, hopefully we achieved what we set out to achieve.
It was great. All right, have a great day.
All right, thanks, Joe.
All righty, bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening in to my discussion with Dr. Cohen about testosterone and the older athlete. You can find out more information about Dr. Cohen in the show notes. And while you're there, you can sign up to take a free fitness practices assessment, send us a question to address on the podcast, see all of our episodes, subscribe to our podcast, and you can sign up for our newsletter. If you are on social media and enjoyed this episode, please post about it. That'd be a great help. Thanks again.